My friends, tea is ready, and today we got apple cinnamon, so a bit of spice to your morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you find yourself listening to this. Mike is ready. I am ready. And the important question is, are you ready, my friend? Hey, welcome to the Mykel Broady Podcast. I am Mykel Broady. Thank you so much for listening today. We have finally made it. This is the season finale of the Y series, a 5-month-ish, I'm guessing, series that kind of went a little bit on longer than I expected it, but we are here, and I'm thankful. And I want to say, thank you to everyone who listened to the series throughout the whole time. Even if you're listening to this months or years down the road, thank you. I appreciate you for being on this journey with us. I'm glad that we can learn with you, that we can grow with you, and we have a lot in store. I want to start off by, I think, something kind of interesting. It was a bit of a slap in the face, but cool. I can laugh at my pain at times, like Kevin Hart, right? So we have some people working at our house right now to get our shower fixed, and one of the gentlemen approached me this morning and said, "Hey, what is the coolest thing you're gonna do today?" And I was like, "Oh, first of all, one, I really appreciate that question. I feel like we don't ask that question enough." So anyway, so he asked me this question. And after feeling a bit touched for a second of just, thank you, man, I appreciate that, I was like, I'm going to likely record an episode for my podcast today. And kind of left it at that. And he looked at me for a second, almost as if I was waiting for me to laugh. And he's like, "Oh," with a little chuckle, so that's the coolest thing you're going to do today, huh? And I know I know he didn't mean no harm, but I was like, oh, wow, that shows the love that podcasts get. But hey, I'm happy to be here today. Just for the record, I still think this is the coolest thing I've done today, or I will do today. So I'm happy to be here. And we have a ton to talk about. I mean, it's the season finale listener feedback episode, so we're actually going to hear words from the listeners of the podcast themselves and how it affected them, or how they move the content forward. So really fascinating stuff there, but also just a lot of reflections. In fact, I'd like to start us off by just sharing kind of the contrast that I saw before, the first episode that I recorded and now this episode, the sixth one. So a common thing I like to do before every episode is walk around the pond near my house. I like to just kind of clear my mind, get focused on, the topics at hand, really make sure my heart's in the right place. And it was interesting, the first time I did this walk for the Story Inspiring Now episode, I felt a bit nervous. Not that I was completely nervous or so nervous that I couldn't do the episode, because obviously it's out there, but I just felt it. I didn't feel 100% confident. And so what I noticed was that first time I was walking around the pond, it was like I was doing multiple laps, almost as if I just kept walking the same lap around until maybe I was going to be 100% confident. I don't know what I was waiting for. I remember kind of just thinking about different thoughts that maybe I wanted to bring up. Not sure if I had the full confidence to just go on there with no script and just be me. And it's crazy to think about the difference, the contrast between that time walking around the pond to today. Today it was a bit windy. It wasn't as sunny as the first time, but my confidence was there. In fact, I didn't even walk 3 laps around it, or however many I did the first time. I only did 1. That's all I needed to get my mind right, to get here to speak with you. Yes, it may have helped that I just listened to J. Cole's The Off Season the whole time. I feel like that exemplifies a lot of the growth that I've had personally, and I trust that you've been able to grow as well through the process. And I want to start off by sharing 3 main lessons I've learned. The first is re-listening had me glistening. So re-listening to this podcast, re-listening to the episodes, just were so meaningful for me. I touched on in the first one, I was really inspired to do this podcast in the first place because of all the conversations I was having last summer and seeing, wow, I'm feeling so inspired after this episode. How is there a way that we can relay some of these messages or share these messages with other people around the world for their benefit too? It almost feels like I'm selfish if I don't share this, But what I didn't realize is the value of actually re-listening to the audios, re-listening to the conversations. And of course, it's not typical for me to record a one-on-one call with a friend. And so that's why I've never really done that. And also, to be honest, I've always had a bias of I don't want to be so caught up recording what's happening that I'm not living, in the moment, and that I'm not experiencing what's happening right in front of me. But ironically, what I realize is that with so much stuff in today's environment, all the stimuli out there to catch our attention, you easily forget things, and I forget key information, or I look over the minor details in the conversation. And so it was such an honor to listen to, the podcast episodes with people I talk to all the time, Mickey Revenaugh, LaWanda Stone, Coach Rich, and I was just smiling the whole time. Of course, I'm not forgetting Jonah, but I was just smiling the whole time because it was just such an honor to listen to it again, to hear thoroughly what they had to say. All of this really encouraged me for my personal life to be better at recording, to be better at recording different events, different thoughts, ideas, emotions, feelings that I'm having at the moment. And so I've been doing that, whether it be just in a typical one-on-one conversation now, I'll just have a note card off to the side, and whenever something really inspires me or I feel like I should definitely take note of this, I just jot it down. And I'll come back to it later, but at least I'm not forgetting that crucial moment. I don't want to risk the chance of forgetting this. And so that's one key lesson I learned, was just how re-listening had me glistening. So I need to do a better job at capturing some of these moments, at just recording them, so I can come back to them at another time. Another lesson dealt with critics, or a critic. And I'm not talking about outside critics. I like to follow what, the genius, the legend, the GOAT, Kendrick Lamar said in his new song, N95. Oh, you worried about a critic? That ain't protocol. Followed by a colorful word for female dog that I'll exclude here from the podcast. But what I'm talking about is a critic that lies within. I had to really watch myself throughout this course of the season because I was too hard on myself at times. I think it's even a testament to how many laps I was doing around the pond at the beginning. It's like I was waiting for that moment when I was perfectly confident, when I deliver everything the way I want to, but that's not the case. And I've had to really be patient with myself throughout this experience with the podcast. What I will say though is, who better to be a critic than myself? Because I think what bothers me at times when I think of critics in society is they typically lack three things, and these three things are critical. One, what the person has, what they currently have at the moment. This can include a person's skills, abilities, talents, fill in the blank. Two, the ability to be in their shoes. The ability to actually act on what you're recommending. I think that's a huge part, at least to know exactly what it feels like to be in their shoes. And three, most of the time, are they truly aware of your potential? Are they truly aware of what you're capable of? I do wish to expand on potential here, because I don't really mean it in the traditional sense of, oh, this person's going to do amazing things in this field. I actually mean it in a way of, well, what if your potential is in a different place? What if your energy needs to be channeled elsewhere? Can a critic see that? Can they see that you have potential in a field outside the one you're currently in? I often would argue that a lot of times they don't, which is why they confine you to that field. And so when I think of all three of those things, are you aware of what you hold, what you possess? Are you capable of being in the person's shoes? Are you capable of doing the actions that you're recommending? Hey folks, Mykel Broady here, just kind of in the middle of editing this episode, and I realized this part isn't particularly clear, and I want to be sure I'm very clear on what I mean by being in their shoes and being able to act on it. Of course, I understand it's impossible for another person to be in someone else's shoes perfectly, completely, and to act on that decision. A critic, their role is not to act on the words they're recommending, which is sort of a problem in my opinion. And what I'm more referring to in this sense is, one, when I'm saying be in their shoes, it's about empathy. Are they willing to act as if they were in their shoes when they're making these suggestions? Are they putting themselves in their shoes, empathizing with them, seeing where they're at so they're making the best recommendations possible? And second to that, the whole part of acting, it's not so much of acting, but rather having an influence on the outcome. You see, I believe if you're going to make strong suggestions, make strong words, you should do so if you have a say, if you have some type of influence in it. If all you're really recommending is do this, and you have no influence, you have no power over the action actually happening, to me that's problematic because there's a lack of accountability there. Anyways, hope you're enjoying the show early on. Let's get back to it. And 3, are you aware of your potential? I'm aware of all those things. I understand all of those from my own life. And so who better to be a critic for myself? But the thing in it is to be kind to myself in the process, to not be so hard, to be patient, to understand that it's a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint, as they say. if it's okay to be my toughest critic, but make sure I'm fair and make sure I'm judging all of my performances off of my authenticity. That's always the bar. Am I being authentically myself? Am I living my purpose? Am I speaking my word? Am I doing all those things? Then check the box. We're good. And that's what I've seen a lot from the podcast in this first season. And although there's many things I would like to improve on, I stick to that. I stay rooted in that and understand that it's been a tremendous season. And I have so much more to grow as a person, as a host, as so many other things, as so many titles that I have in life. Another lesson that I'd like to bring up before we get into some of the listener feedback is that a work in progress is exactly where this podcast should be. I know I mentioned that at the first episode, that, this podcast is a work in progress, but I think I initially spoke of it as if it was a temporary state. As if, yes, we're in a work in progress right now in the first season, and then we'll get going after that. But I kind of like the idea of always being a work in progress. It shows that we're constantly improving. And to kind of have that belief, I had to fight some of the norms in society. At times, we connotate a work in progress as, a slow developer or someone who's just a lot of work. Oh, they're a work in progress. That project is just a work in progress, man. You don't want to deal with it. But I'm thankful that this podcast right here is a work in progress. I believe that the unfathomable sets the foundation for continuous improvement. As long as we always have the belief that we don't know everything, as long as we have the willingness to try new things, then the opportunities are endless. And that's why I trust and I feel confident, even more confident saying out loud now that this podcast very much is a work in progress. And it even brings up a good point. I mean, a lot of these things, I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't start this podcast and I was like, all right, here's all the steps I need to take. Let me check this box. Let me do this and that. I just said, hey, I want to speak to people. I want to send a message. I want to learn and grow with them. And we're going to find a way to do it at all costs. And that's what we've been doing this whole first season. And that's what we're going to continue to do moving forward. And so let's continue to stay rooted in that. This is a work in progress. I believe in that. I'm open to suggestions. I'm open to anything you have to say as long as we can continue learning and growing together. So with that being said, those are some of the really personal improvements and lessons I've had to learn for myself. But now I want to move into the listener feedback, bring in some of the listeners here and what inspired them, how they were impacted by some of the content. And we'll go episode by episode. So we'll start off with episode 1, the story inspiring now. But before we get into that, again, it feels cool, like even the contrast between doing that first solo cast, being by myself in the room recording it, to even now I'm in the room by myself. It's not as nippy as the first time. If anything, it's hot. So as we can tell, we're completely opposite here. But I feel good. It feels almost natural. And I hope that's a good thing. I hope that means that I'm improving and doing this and I'm getting more comfortable, and not that I'm just getting crazier talking to myself, but I'm having fun with it. And we're going to continue to do that. And so the first episode, what my goal was to literally what the title says, the story inspiring now, what inspired this moment we currently find ourselves in. I wanted to set the scene for everyone and make sure, the mission is clear and we understand where we're going. And so to kick us off for the very first listener feedback portion is a good friend of mine, James McKnight. And before I even just go into his feedback, I just want to say he's a tremendous man. He, from the very first moment I met him, he just spoke life into me. He had so much encouragement to offer me. And once he saw my potential, he needed to make sure that I saw it myself. And I remember he emailed me immediately after we got off a call and just talked about how he's so proud of me and he's always here. If there's ever a moment that I lack confidence, if there's ever a moment that doubt creeps within me, he said to always give him a call and he will quickly remind me of my greatness. And so I just want to say, Brother James, thank you so much for believing in me, for, just inspire my journey. It's an honor, man. And so it's also an honor to have you be the first person that we share the feedback with. And I'm sorry, I'm just, thank you, man. I do appreciate you. I'm not going to lie, I'm not doing this for the fans too, but I do have a couple of tears in my eyes right now just thinking about that. And it just shows like how much you do mean to me, man. Like, thank you. And to encourage people out there, this is how much you can mean to other people. By just being there, by showing that you're there on their journey, it means so much to people. And so let's get into James' feedback, though. Don't want to delay it any much longer. Hey, James, what do you got for us, brother?
This message is for King Mykel. Man, love the kickoff music. Love the start of this podcast. I am so excited to hear more. You are a natural born host and so engaging, so thought provoking. Love how you set the expectations so clearly regarding the purpose of your podcast. Your sense of humor was the perfect touch of drizzle on the top of my caramel macchiato, and I cannot wait for my cup to be full of knowledge, inspiration, and engagement.
I must say that the macchiato part gets me every single time. I'm happy I can be that drizzle brother. I wanted to include that at the very beginning, not to pat myself on the back, but to highlight again just the support this podcast has from people just around the world, and I'm thankful for it. And he didn't just stop here, by the way, folks. He actually touched on something right after this part that was almost, it kind of gave me goosebumps because it touched on the whole critic part I brought up earlier. How one thing in particular, heading into the first episode, I didn't know if I wanted to include Mykel's big movie, if I wanted to kind of include that segment in the episode. And I was definitely overthinking it, looking back at it, but I just didn't know, like, is that necessary? Like, is that actually valuable to share? Does that just seem like I'm being, too full of it? And so I was really second guessing myself and questioning and all of those things, and I just decided to go with it, obviously. And I'm really glad I did because it resonated with James, and it even left him thinking about his own childhood. And you can hear it for yourself here.
And I love your Mikkel big movie experiences because it reminded me of the time when I used to pretend to be a teacher when I was a kid, and I would ask my mom to buy all these school supplies and make my brother and sister, uh, be in my class, So that just really took me back to childhood, and it's no coincidence that years later that I'm a faculty member teaching at a college. So it really brought a lot of value to how we grow up and the things that we're into as children and how valuable it is to have parents or anyone in our lives, such as mentors, that can see the vision in its early forms.
Absolutely, brother. And again, I'm glad it resonated with you. I'm glad it went with it. Lesson for me to definitely take note of moving forward as the host of the podcast, one of them at least. It is crazy to think like how much influence our childhood holds, over some of our current desires, passions, and all of that. And even again, just looking back at the Mike Elvis big movie, this is sort of what I do now in a sense, right? Not to the extreme, but sharing my life. That it's incredible how it just manifested itself into my life 15 however many years later. I also thought you brought up a great point of the importance of having people in your life that encourage that, though, that encourage you to follow those goals, that encourage you to pursue what you enjoy as a kid. And thankfully in my life, yes, this is the every single episode has a segment just specifically on Jessica Brody, my mother. But that was the case. Growing up, she just gave me so much freedom to explore what I desired, what my brother and I loved to do. She was never hard on us. She never chose a path for us. That's something I'm very thankful for. Speaking with different people in my life, I see how that's common. Some families literally just set up their lives for their kids, and they think they're doing them good, but really it's just doing them the worst harm possible. It's the worst thing they can possibly do for them. And I'm glad that I had a mother that gave me the flexibility, that gave me the freedom to pursue that on my own. And James, I believe you had one more thing you wanted to say about collective learning. Let's get to it.
I agree that there is a need for more collective learning, where I believe that we're past the days of instructional, lecture-based learning. I personally learn better in group settings and love the idea of collective learning. And so there is a great need for that, as well as a great need to comprehend what we learn from others. I agree that we can learn from anyone when we become open to the collective learning environment. And so I'm just excited about this podcast, man, and I really appreciate you for not giving up and taking that leap. So here's to a great start of a podcast and a committed listener that you have in me.
Yes, sir, I trust it. I really do. And I want to touch on the point that you brought up because I got scared. Like when you talked about collective learning and you're like, I love to do it. Yeah, I'm someone who loves group settings. I got scared because I'm like, well, what about the people that don't? What about the introverts? What about the people that are really shy? The people that, they don't thrive in those type of environments, but they could still benefit from collective learning, of course. And so I'm sitting here and I'm trying to think about, okay, well, how can we get them involved as well? And that's when I was like, well, duh, for a lifelong learner, that environment is anywhere. You can learn. There's so much material for us to learn wherever we find ourselves, if we're being honest. But it requires us to do exactly what you said, James. Is there a desire to learn? There can be a million different materials of different things that we can learn in front of us. But if we don't have a desire, then is it really going to affect us? Are we really going to take what we just read, heard, or whatever and put it into action moving forward? And so I loved what you talked about on collective learning, also a huge part being a desire to learn, no matter who you are. If you're shy, you don't like group settings, or if you love group settings and you are the biggest extrovert out there, then awesome. We can all learn as long as we have that desire. Thank you for bringing up that point as well, James. And now I would like to move on to the second episode, Learn for a Lifetime. I guess what a perfect segue. Thank you, James, for that. I want to go into the Learn for the Lifetime episode, and we have some feedback from a good friend of mine, Chris Hess, just a lifelong learner himself. And he has some stuff to say about confronting shortcomings, beginner power. Let's get to it. What do you got for us, Chris?
Hey, Mykel. Really enjoying the podcast so far. Don't think it will come as any surprise to you, but the episode with Mickey Revenaugh about learning for a lifetime probably resonated with me the most. I really loved a bit near the beginning where you applauded Mickey for being able to notice shortcomings in herself and being courageous enough to find a way to fill those gaps. It's something I often try to do.
Okay, for the record, that was a huge understatement. Chris, since I've known him, it's like every single time I speak to him, he's learning something new, whether it be a new recipe, a new instrument, or he's working on a new book, or even just something at work. Huge understatement. Anyways, back to your feedback.
Then you pivoted to curiosity and how important that was for seeing these holes. Curiosity is the number one thing I look for when I'm hiring someone new because it means there's room for and a commitment to growth. It made me think of that book that we both have enjoyed recently by David Epstein called Range, and also the idea of the value of putting oneself in a beginner's mind. So much value in that, and the perspective that novelty can have to see patterns an expert might not. Seems like some mighty good ideas for a podcast episode coming up. Anyway, off to a great start and absolutely loving the theme music. A funky bass line with some Fender Rhodes gets me every time. Keep up the good work.
I gotta be honest, I've been thoroughly surprised by all the positive feedback on the music for the podcast. Just for the record, I know I haven't shouted out the source, or I hope it doesn't make it seem like that's me, although I really hope, I wish I could do those things. That is not me. That is actually from a source called Les FM, LES FM, from Pixabay, and it's called Funky Background Energetic Music, I think, something of that such nature. So got some free music from Pixabay and use it for the podcast. I'm glad it's resonating with the listeners, but thank you first and foremost to Les FM for creating that groovy tune. I'm glad it's resonating with you too, man. That's awesome. And to get back to some of the things you were mentioning, yes, absolutely agree. Mickey is amazing. And I loved how a lot of her addressing shortcomings was curiosity, which you touched on, matched with accountability, which I know I mentioned this in the episode, but it's worth mentioning again. We need to be accountable. That's a huge part to the learning journey. And yes, the beginner's mind, my friend, just a incredible asset to anyone, truly, I believe, even an expert. And as David Epstein and spoke about in his bestseller Range, which is a tremendous book that I recommend to anyone, there's an advantage that beginners can have over experts, or at least experts that refuse to develop some qualities of a beginner. I do wish to expand on this point a bit further, but in doing so, I want to be careful because I don't want to make it seem like a beginner and an expert, like, yes, be a beginner over being an expert, or having a wide range of things is better than specializing, because that's not the case. Each bring really unique things to the table. However, there are trade-offs, as we know in life. And so, as it relates to the expert, sometimes a beginner can have an advantage over them because they're so narrowly focused. See, with hyper specialization and all those things, they specialize in one field. And so think of it as if they're in one hole, right? They're digging this one hole in one field of study. As they get further in their studies, a lot of them tend to hyper specialize. So it's not like they're jumping into other holes around to learn new things, other fields of study. They're still in that same hole, that still field of study, but they're stuck there. They're just digging deeper and deeper into the field, doing great work, I must add. However, when they tend to approach problems, at times it's hard for them to look outside of their field of study because they're so heavily involved in that field. And so being a beginner can be helpful because you can come in with fresh eyes and you can apply a wide range of studies into a problem. For instance, you hear the thing of like, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem is going to look like it needs to be solved with a hammer. And so that can be the case sometimes with hyper specialists and all those things, is they get so deep into their field that it's hard for them to just take a step back and apply a wide range of topics to a situation. So I hope that brief explanation about how a beginner may have an advantage over an expert helps. Trust that we will definitely expand on this moving forward into season 2. I now want to move on to the third episode, which was Defy the Odds with Coach Rich. Tremendous episode, as are all the episodes. Not to, again, hopefully you feel the same. And so I want to bring up a written comment, feedback left by a good friend of mine, Serene, who is just amazing. She's doing a lot of things that we'll probably touch on her in a second here. But she was inspired from Coach Rich and I's conversation, and she was reminded of a good poem of hers that she knows. And so this is what Serene had to say. Denise Frohman, in one of my favorite poems entitled No Child Left Behind with Dominique Christina, says, quote, "The first time I read a book by a Latino author was in college. The wind in my chest stood up. It had been 18 long years with textbooks filled with everything but me," end quote. Serene went on to say, "I think this is how it feels anytime someone breathes life into your partially assembled ideas and lived experiences. The wind in your chest stands up. Your eyes widen and glisten. It's another piece to the puzzle. It's affirmation of your potentiality. It's answering the belief you had that there was greater depth there, but not having the flashlight to see it until it was gifted to you." And so I'll pause there on her comment. Serene, I just want to say I completely agree with you. You know, having someone agree with your journey, or at least see it, at least in a sliver of the way that you see it, is so encouraging. And I think partially why, too, it has to do with the fact that, you know, what we're doing is so incredible, right? Like, especially you, Serene. Let's not act like you're just doing the ordinary. You're looking at issues that have been systemic, that have been in society for hundreds of years, and you're looking at how you can change it, one step at a time. You're doing extraordinary work, Serene. And so, yes, I can totally see why when someone looks at you and says, wow, yeah, I see where you're going, and I encourage you, and I continue to go forward with that. You are ecstatic because you're so used to having people telling you the opposite. You're crazy. You're irrational. Do you really know about race relations from over the course of United States history and all those things? That's all you're probably used to hearing. And so you absolutely have a reason to, not that you were asking if it's valid or not, but do it. You know, feel that wind in your chest. Feel that, because you deserve it. I want to go back to your comment, though. You said, then she says, she being Denise Frohman, quote, "For the first time, my body knew a world that could hold it. See, the quickest way to silence a mouth is to treat it as if none had come before." I'll say that quote again. See, the quickest way to silence a mouth is to treat it as if none had come before. End quote. Serene went on to say, "We use other people's words to navigate our own worlds until we have the capacity to build the flashlights ourselves. And even then, we never stop learning from each other. I am grateful for the people who have taken on the responsibility of persisting and contributing to the conversation for the sake of others. They show us that showing up matters, that allowing for possibilities beyond our own perceptions are essential." I do want to get at that quote because I was pretty intrigued, because I was trying to wrap my head around it myself, and I'm sure I'm overthinking it. I know you kind of explained it, but I feel like there's a bit more to it. The quickest way to silence a mouth is to treat it as if none had come before. I'm curious to know what you think as a listener out there. What was the first thing that came to mind when you heard that? Please let me know, whether through email, dropping a comment on the website episode, or just reaching out to me personally, whatever way you see fit. And thank you, Serene, for sharing that part. But it doesn't stop there. Not kind of away from the poem, though, more towards Black Springs, which we'll learn about here right now. She then went on to say, speaking of, the story of Coach Rich doing the impossible and completing high school in basically 2 years reminded me of my great-grandparents' experience with developing their community back in the day. Black Springs, the first black settlement in northern Nevada, was untended by the local government, as were the people. As they worked to obtain water rights, electricity, parks, and the like, they were treated with little respect, given only a couple documents at a time to complete as if they were incapable of doing more. Why do people relegate us to their limited vision of who we can be, what we can do? It is important for us to recognize this so we do not take on these assumptions as our own. And we must be conscious of the limitations we may set on others, and instead try to open up as many paths as we can for others. This is my favorite takeaway from the episode. I appreciate the thoroughness given to each topic on the show. Looking forward to more. Well, Serene, I appreciate the thoroughness in your feedback. I'm looking forward to more and even having you on the show one day, perhaps. And to answer your very deep question there, kind of why do people relegate us to their limited vision of who we are, what we can do, what we can be? That's a loaded question. And it's not our responsibility to figure that out because that's not fair. It's not valid in the first place for them to do that to us. I think that's important to recognize, and I know you did by saying this is why it's important. We can't let their assumptions, we can't let what they project on us affect our actions. And you are absolutely right. We should always, it should always start with us. What do we want to do? What brings us joy? What are we passionate about? What gets us up in the morning and we're like, oh my gosh, this is all I want to do. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm breathing. Let's pursue that. We shouldn't be held up on the potential of someone just being jealous of us, and so they'll limit us. The potential of someone just never thinking of something before. That's unfathomable to me. Maybe that's the case. Maybe they just don't want to see you win for many reasons. Who knows? But again, that's not our responsibility to figure it out. And we shouldn't even be wasting our time with that. Again, bringing up what Kendrick Lamar said, that's not protocol. That's not what we do. Thank you again, Serene, for just the great feedback. And I'm looking forward to just chatting and catching up with you soon. Thank you for all the great work you do in the Reno community and all the amazing work you're going to do for society at large. Moving on to episode 4, Redefine Normal. We have no listener feedback for this one, sad face. However, I think this is a great time to just, kind of a call to action for more listener feedback out there. And I anticipate these episodes being the longest ones we have, just because I really want to hear your voice, and I'm okay with that. If you want to just skip through it and people don't end up listening to it, if this one doesn't get a lot of views or listens, so what? So be it. I would love to hear your voice. That's what this podcast is here for. And so please, whenever you have a chance, even if something resonates with you from this season, reach out to me. Put a comment under the episode on the website. There's a great place to where you can interact with other users there, and I hope that kind of gets booming heading into the season 2 and 3. But I also want to say another thing. Since we're talking about redefining normal and we're on the topic of literally doing that, and the guest on that episode was Jonah Yolen, who is a redefiner of normal himself, I want to share an update on Jonah's journey, perhaps. 2 to 3 weeks ago, Jonah reached out to me and was like, hey man, let's go grab coffee. I really want to see you. Totally, man. So I went and had coffee with him, and he was just very excited, thrilled. He had a smile on his face as big as Lawanda's. And when I was talking to him, he was like, hey, so guess what? I left my job. And I'm like, okay. I didn't expect to hear that with a smile on your face. This job was a great opportunity for him. He's been doing really well in it after he graduated college, and it seemed like he had a promising future there, but he left it. But what's so important is not the fact that he left, but why he left. He then went on to tell me, I didn't feel like my creative endeavors were, I wasn't pursuing them. I didn't feel like I was being creative enough in my own life. And that's something I'm really passionate about. And so if I'm not doing that, then what am I doing anything for? And I just thought that was so honorable. And in fact, he said, and it doesn't just stop there. He was like, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go out to Mexico and I'm going to pursue my creative endeavors. I'm going to pursue music. I'm going to pursue acting. I'm going to finally learn how to speak Spanish fluently and be in an environment where I'm challenged to do so. And I couldn't help but just be left without words. I thought, what an inspiration. Someone who has so much confidence and faith in himself that he's betting on himself. Who knows what Mexico's holds? Who knows if he'll, get into these music endeavors like he desires, if he'll be the actor that he desires. But guess what? He's going to try. And he's not going to stop until he's pursuing something that brings him joy, that makes him happy, that makes him want to get up again and do it all over again, each and every single day. And so I just want to bring up Jonah's journey because I think it's such an inspiration for all of us. Not to say, let's just quit our jobs and go do whatever you desire, but is there an area in your life where you do need to do more believing in yourself? Gosh, it's a mouthful. Is there an area in your life where you do need to do more believing in yourself? Try saying that twice, 3 times even. I encourage you to just seek that. Make sure what you're doing makes you happy. Thank you, Jonah, for being a tremendous reminder for all of us to believe in yourself at all costs and to always do what brings you joy and to never just settle. And best of luck to you on your journey. I'm sure we'll see you on the big stage one day. Heading into the final episode, outside of course, the listener feedback episode, Exemplify Kindness. And that one was with LaWanda Stone. And Jacen, my friend Jacen Bridges, was so kind to leave us a feedback audio. And he's going to touch on even some of the emotions I had on it. Jacen, what did you think about that episode, my friend?
Hi, Mykel. I wanted to send some feedback your way on podcast 4, Exemplify Kindness. Just wanted to start off by saying, of all of your podcasts that I've enjoyed, I enjoyed that one the most for a few reasons. One, as soon as I started listening, I just couldn't put it down. I found the entire conversation between yourself and LaWanda to be extremely engaging. This particular podcast, I just couldn't pause it or walk away from it. Found myself so intrigued from beginning to end. Not only was the topic very engaging, both yourself and LaWanda proved to be subject matter experts in the space. And outside of that, too, it gave me an opportunity to kind of take a step back and reflect on the opportunities in my life where kindness was not something that you had to do, but just a natural part of who you are. It sounds easy, but we definitely take it for granted. I can think many times in my life, but one in particular, having survived Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, definitely a very traumatic event, and you would expect that those extreme times create extreme people. But for me, what I noticed when I look back is on the news and TV and all the hype, they showed all the negative, all the bad, all the looting, the rioting, stuff you expect to see in news. But when you're close enough to it, the things I remember are the kindness and the gestures and the way the community really came together and thought about each other and all the stuff that we'd all been going through and that we continue to go through before, during, and after the hurricane had passed. It definitely shows the kindness really is within people, and it wasn't something that we had to think about. It was just something that we did naturally. But I like to think, though, outside of that, it shouldn't take devastating events or pandemics for us to be kind to each other. Looking forward to your final podcast and many more to come. Thank you so much, Mykel.
Well, thank you, Jacen. And I got to say, I see exactly what you're talking about by that feeling of being captivated on that episode of just, I can't put this down. And for me, it was fascinating heading into the conversation. I just felt the same way. Going into recording it, I felt that I was a bit more excited than other episodes. Not to say that this one was better than any of the others, but with this one, it felt like it's just so incredible that we can do this for other people and ourselves ultimately, right? And to me, all I can really think of is comparing it to a superpower. I know that might sound cliche, kindness is a superpower, but I really believe it, because let's look at it. If you can be kind to someone by just being yourself, just let's look at the situation here. You are authentically you. You show up in a space and you notice someone. You ask someone questions about their future. You show a genuine interest to them. You have excitement when you're talking to them. And in turn, that person walks away. And again, this is not the only way to be kind, but they walk away. And they move from a state of frustration, maybe, a lack of confidence, self-consciousness, into a state of self-actualization, confidence, hunger, encouragement. And in turn, that manifests itself into actions that then move on to inspire other people. My friends, if you ask me, that is a superpower. That is better than a lot of superpowers probably even out there. You know, there's a lot of people that would like superpowers. Like if you were to say, would you want to be Spider-Man for a day? I'm sure there are a million people here in Reno that would love to go flying around downtown. But I'm glad we're safe from that. But it's just that's the case. We have this power each and every day we wake up. And that is so encouraging. And so when you hear of this, when you hear of this power that all of us withhold, you got to be captivated. And by being kind, that's not always just an external thing, you going out of your way to do something. But like LaWanda mentioned, what was a huge revelation for me, and even it sounds like yourself, kindness is an energy. It's who you are. It's how you move through the world. I got to be honest, heading into the episode, yes, I was still very much excited for that, captivated, encouraged to talk about how we can help out other people. But I didn't really look at that internal view of it the way LaWanda did, how she said, you don't even have to get at the point where you're like, oh, should I go be kind to someone? Sometimes you just move that way. By how you move, that's kind to some people. And it can move them to levels we never even expected. And that to me was a revelation. And I would encourage for everyone, find that kindness within you. It's in you. You have that energy. I want to talk about the other thing, kindness following Katrina you mentioned, and how it does seem like kindness does always show up in moments of hardship, moments of struggle. And I gotta say, thinking maybe why? Well, one, before I even get there, I agree with you. How incredible is it that it's like you don't even have to think. You just saw people acting. You saw people being kind. And it did reiterate and almost reinforce that point of kindness comes from within. It's not something that we have to be attached with one day, but if we see a need, we meet it. And that offers me a fine segue into this point regarding kind of seeing kindness so often throughout hardships, but not so often when things are normal. It's because when things are hard, you usually see a need. During Katrina, there was a need for people that they needed help. They needed someone to empathize with them. We're even seeing it throughout COVID, the pandemic. I remember especially last year when I was working with Pearson and we were looking at numbers with like their global learner survey, empathy was at the top of the list. And that's not a coincidence. There was a need during that time during the pandemic when people saw people are lonely, people are hurting, we need to show up. And so, it's encouraging, yes. I think that's something we should certainly note. Thank God that people are kind, that a lot of us tend to be naturally kind in those moments of hardship because we certainly need it. But I'd also make the argument that we need it now. But how can we be kind even when we're not facing the worst hardship ever? How can we just be kind when things are calm? And what I come to the conclusion of is there's always a need. Again, when in those moments of hardship, we may feed off of that because we see a need. And so when times are normal, it might be hard to be kind for some people because maybe they don't see a need. They don't see that they need to be kind. There's always a need to be kind. And what I would say for anyone who kind of struggles with that or feels like, yeah, maybe I relate. And sometimes, to be honest with you, I'm holding up my hand right now too. There's always needs out there that we can fulfill. There's always needs out there that we can help people reach, that we can help people meet. And let's just look at the basics. A lot of people have the need to do something they love. A lot of people have a need to feel like they have a purpose in this world. A lot of people have a need that, they desire whatever they do to be meaningful in society. They don't want to just be a being on this planet. They want to be a meaningful being. They want to be a being with a purpose, a being that left an impact. Why don't we follow that need? And all we have to do is just gauge how they're doing. Hey, how are you doing? What's some things you really enjoy? Pursue that. Push them towards that. Help them get there. That's being kind. That's meeting them. That's meeting a need. That's always there. The need to just have someone care, even. How about that? The need to just have someone care for you for just one moment. What can you do for other people? Just by being authentically you, how can you show up in their lives? I think that's a great call out. Thank you for prompting this, Jacen, because it's absolutely necessary that, yes, thankful, but we need to see kindness at all times, not just in times of hardship. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to make a huge announcement, and that is the announcement for Season 2. The title of it is, drumroll please, maybe I'll put in the sound effects like now. Awesome. Season 2 is Oxymoronic Gems. People are probably like, what the beep did you just say? Oxymoronic Gems. It sounds pretty cool when you say it, don't you? it's all about oxymorons, a figure of speech that uses, words that seem like polar opposites, but finds a way to use it creatively. So like comfortably uncomfortable, or entry-level leader, or certain uncertainty, or lowest highs, or rationally irrational. Wink, wink. These are all titles for the upcoming season, and that you can expect to hear from me and special guests that will join me as well. But that's what to expect. It's just looking at a lot of the things in society we may think of as polar opposites. How can we find a way to bring them together, to intertwine them for our benefit and society, truthfully? And so look forward to that. I can tell you right now, I'm really excited for, just the friends that I'll bring on. My mom will be on as a guest. Also, what you can look forward to is a content calendar. I realized that this season we were very inconsistent in reaching out to one another, and I know that's on me, but I want to be more consistent. I want to you to, even if you desire to have a habit for the podcast, to have your own little routine of how you listen to it, how you apply some of the topics in your life and move forward with it. I'll have a content calendar created that has updated dates for when all of the episodes in season 2 will launch. You can check this out on the website. There will be a calendar tab somewhere up there soon. In addition to this, some more changes you can expect to social media clips. I know we live in a world where, short form content is dominated, and that doesn't really work well when you have a podcast that have episodes that are about 40 minutes to sometimes an hour, 15 minutes. Not everyone doesn't have time to listen to it in full, and sometimes you'll listen to it for 20 minutes, I understand, and not really pick it back up until, never. So I want to find a way to create more short form content so people can interact with it, even those that may not be traditional podcast users. And so I'm really going to ramp up my social media game. I plan on, really going into full social media campaigns on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Am I forgetting anything? Facebook. A lot more social media clips that you can expect. 30-second videos, hopefully not 30-second videos, 1-minute videos, 2-minute videos, whatever. We'll have it all ready for you to go, so it's meeting you where you're at in the moment, and that you can stay connected with us throughout the week consistently. I also want to do a last-minute shout-out, quick one to a leader I mentioned, I believe, in the second episode with Mickey. His name is Narain Gursahani. And I mispronounced his name the first time, and so I apologize, Narain. Thank you for being a tremendous leader, though. My words are still the same. Thank you for being a tremendous leader. Thank you for inspiring those around you and being one of those who you have the spotlight, you have the title, but instead of abusing your power or using it for others' detriment at times, you shift that spotlight over to them, and you let them know that there's superstars. So thank you, Narain Gursahani. All the best to you. Hope to chat soon, man. To all the listeners, my friends, as we continue forward, I'm excited to be on this journey with you. It's a lifetime. Let's hit the music. The one that everyone loves. 1, 2, oh, here it goes. First season, we had to end it off with a bang. But speaking of a bang, looks like that music's coming back. Here I go.